What up, y'all? St. Pete. I'm going to be reading a little bit from the Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious by Carl Jung. And in this little bit that I'm going to read, these couple pages, he talks about spirit and the symbolism relating to spirit. And if you listen and pay attention closely, you can see how that's playing out today if you're paying attention. So I'm going to get right to it. Jung says, I am convinced that the growing impoverishment of symbols has a meaning. It is a development that has an inner consistency. Everything that we have not thought about and that has therefore been deprived of a meaningful connection with our developing consciousness has got lost. If we now try to cover our nakedness with the gorgeous trappings of the East, as the Theosophists do, we would be playing our own history false. A man does not sink down to beggary only to pose afterwards as an Indian potentate. It seems to me that it would be far better stoutly to avow our spiritual poverty, our symbollessness, instead of feigning a legacy to which we are not the legitimate heirs at all. We are surely the rightful heirs of Christian symbolism, but somehow we have squandered this heritage. We have let the house our fathers built fall into decay, and now we try to break into oriental palaces that our fathers never knew. Anyone who has lost the historical symbols and cannot be satisfied with substitutes is certainly in a very difficult position today. Before him there yawns the void, and he turns away from it in horror. What is worse, the vacuum gets filled with absurd political and social ideas, which one and all are distinguished by their spiritual bleakness. That's what I always say, that today we see all the foolishness, because we have grown technologically, but we haven't grown spiritually. And what he's suggesting is that this impoverishment of symbols has something to do with it, right? Because remember what he was saying about the symbolism, the symbols that we see, that the ancient world would create these symbols for the collective unconscious to project onto that symbol so that the collective unconscious doesn't project onto the personal consciousness, right? Because that's what's happening. The collective unconscious, which isn't personal, it's existed since the beginning, is projecting onto the personal consciousness of each of the individual, and it's a distorted message. It's not the unconscious doesn't communicate with the conscious mind, according to my studies. Doesn't communicate in the way that the conscious mind communicates. So it gets very confusing and it confuses. So the symbols that we see in the ancient world, them symbols gave the collective unconscious a place to be projected upon so that it wouldn't be projected upon the personal consciousness of the people and, you know, lead to all this buffoonery that we see today, So, what is worse, the vacuum gets filled with absurd political and social ideas, which one and all are distinguished by their spiritual bleakness. But if he cannot get along with these dogmatisms, he sees himself forced to be serious for once with his alleged trust in God, though it usually turns out that his fear of things going wrong if he did so is even more persuasive. That's my opinion. Doing things out of fear and doing things out of love are two different things and produce two different effects. So if you're generating from a place of fear, it isn't the same as generating from a place of love where you're doing something so that you're doing the right thing so you don't get caught, compared to doing the right thing because it's the right thing. Is that there's a big difference in that. So this fear is far from unjustified, for where God is closest, danger seems greatest. It is dangerous to avow spiritual poverty, for the poor man has desires, and whoever has desires calls down some fatality on himself. A Swiss proverb puts it drastically: behind every rich man stands a devil, and behind every poor man too. Um, just as in Christianity, the vow of worldly poverty turned the mind away from the riches of this earth, so spiritual poverty seeks to renounce the false riches of the spirit in order to withdraw not only from the sorry remnants which today call themselves the Protestant Church of a great past, but also from all the allurements of the odorous East, in order finally to dwell with itself alone, where, in the cold light of consciousness, the blank barrenness of the world reaches to the very stars. So we in the Western world, we were brought this esotericism, this knowledge of self was brought to the Western world through Kabbalah. So, you know, for Europeans to go searching into Eastern traditions when they didn't even look at the traditions that their ancestors left them in the West, it kind of doesn't make sense. Whether it's Kabbalah was esotericism was brought in Kabbalah, Freemasonry, tarot, alchemy, all of these sacred sciences that were these traditions, give us that knowledge of self, and that's what's been taken out of um, circulation. This information has just been either looked at as woo woo, or it's just like been outright taken out of circulation, and that's why it's occulted. It's been hidden from the people. Um, so we have inherited this poverty from our fathers. I will remember the confirmation lessons I received at the hands of my own father. The catechism bored me unspeakably. One day I was turning over the pages of my little book in the hope of finding something interesting, when my eye fell on the paragraphs about the Trinity. This interested me at once, and I waited impatiently for the lessons to get to that section. But when the longed for lesson arrived, my father said, "We'll skip this bit. I can't make head or tails of it." With that, my last hope was laid in the grave. I admired my father's honesty, but this did not alter the fact that from then on, all talk of religion bored me to death. And it's another problem. Like with the religions today, they're just giving you the exoteric. They're just giving you the outer um, knowledge of these traditions. They're not giving you that inner knowledge. They're not these religions, these traditions in their esoteric can teach us about ourselves. That's what all these traditions are about, essentially, all of them, you know what I mean? They're about building the brain and building the heart, especially Freemasonry in its pure form. Not what's going on today in the lodges. In the lodges today, it's just all about, social status and hierarchy, compartmentalized. It's just run amok right now. You know what I mean? So, but Freemasonry in its essence is teaching you how to build the brain and build the heart, and teaching morality and teaching natural law through a system of allegories and symbols. So the symbols are so important when we become so symbol illiterate as a people, and this has very severe repercussions for this lack of no of symbollessness. All right. Our intellect has achieved the most tremendous things. But in the meantime, our spiritual dwelling has fallen into despair, like I was just saying. We'd rather sit on the internet and jerk off instead of reading some of the most profound ancient wisdom that, you know, civilization has to offer. We'd rather argue with people about bullshit, stupid stuff. Very immature, very spiritually immature we are as a whole. We are absolutely convinced that even with the aid of the latest and largest reflecting telescope now being built in America, men will discover behind the farthest nebula no fiery Empyrean. And we know that our eyes will wander despairingly through the dead emptiness of interstellar space, nor is it any better when mathematical physics reveals to us the world of the infinitely small. In the end, we dig up the wisdom of all ages and peoples, only to find that everything most dear and precious to us has already been said in the most superb language. Facts. Hermeticism, right there. The Hermetic principles, right there. I mean, that's it, man. Like once you know that, once you really know that, man, it just changes the way the world, just changes the world, you know, um, So it's already been said. You know what I mean? Like they ain't gonna find nothing new out there. There's nothing new under the sun, as the saying goes. Like greedy children, we stretch out our hands and think that if only we could grasp it, we could possess it too. That's deep. Like greedy children, we stretch out our hands and think that if only we could grasp it, we could possess it too. Mm. But what we possess is no longer valid, and our hands grow weary from the grasping, for riches lie everywhere as far as the eye can reach. All of nature, all the hands, everything is hidden in nature. If you really look at nature, if you look in it and not at it, you will see all the divine proportions, the mathematical Fibonacci. You'll see, the corresponding, and you'll see all the Hermetic principles right within nature. But you got to know the Hermetic principles first in order to see them. So you have to know the words and the definitions in order to then see it. Because if you don't have a definition and a word for something, it doesn't exist to you. So you have to be able to define something. But what we possess is no longer valid, and our hands grow weary from the grasping, for riches lie everywhere as far as the eye can reach. All these possessions turn to water, and more than one sorcerer's apprentice has been drowned in the waters called up by himself if he did not first succumb to the saving delusion that this wisdom was good and that was bad. Information is not good or bad wisdom. It's what you do with it. Information, isn't good or evil. What you do with it will determine that. It is from these adepts that there come those terrifying invalids who think they have a prophetic mission. For the artificial sundering of true and false wisdom creates a tension in the psyche, and from this there arises a loneliness and a craving like that of a morphine addict who always hopes to find companions in his vice. When our natural inheritance has been dissipated, then the spirit too, as Hercules says, has descended from its fiery heights. But when spirit becomes heavy, it turns to water, and with Luciferian presumption, the intellect usurps the seat where once the spirit was enthroned. The spirit may legitimately claim the powers of father over the soul. Not so the earth-born intellect, which is man's sword or hammer, and not a creator of spiritual worlds, a father of the soul. Hence, Ludwig Klaggs and Max Scheler were moderate enough in their attempts to rehabilitate the spirit, for both were children of an age in which the spirit was no longer up above but down below, no longer fire but water. Therefore, the way of the soul in search of its lost father, like Sophia seeking Bythos, leads to the water, to the dark mirror that reposes at its bottom. Whoever has elected for the state of spiritual poverty, the true heritage of Protestantism, carried to its logical conclusion, goes the way of the soul that leads to the water. This water is no figure of speech, but a living symbol of the dark psyche. I can best illustrate this by a concrete example out of many. A Protestant theologian often dreamed the same dream. He stood on a mountain slope with a deep valley below, and in it, a deep lake. He knew in his dream that something had always prevented him from approaching the lake. This time, he resolved to go to the water. As he approached the shore, everything grew dark and uncanny, and a gust of wind suddenly rushed over the face of the water. He was seized by panic, fear, and awoke. This dream shows us the natural symbolism. The dreamer descends into his own depths, and the way leads him to the mysterious water. And now there occurs the miracle of the pool of Bethesda. An angel comes down and touches the water, endowing it with healing power. In the dream, it is the wind, the pneuma, the spirit, which bloweth where it listeth. Man's descent to the water is needed in order to evoke the miracle of its coming to life. But the breath of the Spirit rushing over the dark water is uncanny, like everything whose cause we do not know, since it is not ourselves. It hints at an unseen presence, a noument to which neither human expectations nor the machinations of the will have given life. It lives of itself, and a shudder runs through the man who thought that spirit was merely what he believes, what he makes himself, what is said in books or what people talk about. But when it happens spontaneously, it is a spookish thing, and primitive fear seized the naive mind. The elders of the Igoli tribe in Kenya gave me exactly the same description of the nocturnal god whom they call the maker of fear. He comes to you, they said, like a cold gust of wind, and you shudder. Or he goes whistling round in the tall grass, an African Pan, who glides among the reeds in the haunted noontide hour, playing on the pipes and frightening the shepherds. Thus, in the dream, the breath of the spirit frightened another pastor, a shepherd of the flock, who in the darkness of the night trode the reed-grown shore in the deep valley of the psyche. Yes, that earnest, wild, fiery spirit has made a descent to the realm of nature, to the trees and rocks and the waters of the psyche, like the old man in Nietzsche's Zarathustra who, wearied of humankind, withdrew into the forest to growl with the bears in honor of the Creator. We must surely go the way of the waters, which always tend downward, if we would raise up the treasure. Raise up the treasure. We go to the ways of the water. We go downward into the subconscious and raise out of the subconscious the jewels to the conscious mind. We must surely go the way of the waters, which always tend downward, if we would raise up the treasure, the precious heritage of the Father. In the Gnostic hymn of the soul, the Son is sent forth by his parents to seek the pearl that fell from the king's crown. It lies at the bottom of a deep well guarded by a dragon in the land of the Egyptians, that land of flesh pots and drunkenness with all its material and spiritual riches. The Son and heir sets out to fetch the jewel, but forgets himself and his task in the orgies of Egyptian worldliness until a letter from his father reminds him of what his duty is. He then sets out for the water and plunges into the dark depths of the well, where he finds the pearl on the bottom and in the end offers it to the highest divinity. It just makes me think, like, when our soul contract, when we come here, we have a mission. Our soul is like, look, I'm going down to earth. I'm gonna do this, 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 and this. And then when we get here, the worldliness, we see all this beautifulness. We see all the great food and beautiful sights and blah 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 and everything that's awesome, everything that's great about this place, and we forget our mission. right? And then that's what he's, in my opinion, that's what he's saying right there, that the worldliness, and then from his father reminds him of his duty, and that's getting in touch with the willpower. What I mean, getting in touch with the higher will. First, getting in touch with your will, and then aligning your will with the higher will. And to embrace that creative evolution, every force. That's really what it is. The divine will is creation, expanding, gaining greater awareness of oneself in the world that we're in, right? So, until a letter from his father reminds him of what his duty is, he then sets out for the water and plunges into the dark depths of the well, where he finds the pearl on the bottom, and in the end offers it to the highest divinity. It's the whole hero's journey. You know what I'm saying? You see it in all the mythologies. This hymn, ascribed to Bardesnes, dates from an age that resembled ours in more than one respect. Mankind looked and waited, and it was a fish drawn from the deep that became the symbol of the Savior, the bringer of healing. As I wrote these lines, I received a letter from Vancouver from a person unknown to me. The writer is puzzled by his dreams, which are always about water. Almost every time I dream it is about water. Every time I dream, it is about water. Either I am having a bath, or the water closet is overflowing, or a pipe is bursting, or my home has drifted down to the water's edge, or I see an acquaintance about to sink into the water, or I am trying to get out of water, or I am having a bath and the tub is about to overflow. Water is the commonest symbol for the unconscious. The lake in the valley is the unconscious, which lies, as it were, underneath consciousness, so that it is often referred to as the subconscious, usually with the pejorative connotation of an inferior consciousness. Water is the valley spirit, the water dragon of Tao, whose nature resembles water, a yang embraced in the yin. Psychologically, therefore, water means spirit that has become unconscious. So the dream of the theologian is quite right in telling him that down by the water he could experience the working of the living spirit, like a miracle of healing in the pool of Bethesda. The descent into the depths always seems to precede the ascent. I'll hear that again. The descent into the depths always seems to precede the ascent. Thus, another theologian dreamed that he was on a mountain, a kind of castle of the Grail. He went along a road that seemed to lead straight to the foot of the mountain and up it. But as he drew nearer, he discovered to his great disappointment that a chasm separated him from the mountain, a deep, darksome gorge with underworldly water rushing along the bottom. A steep path led downwards and toilsomely climbed up again on the other side. But the prospect looked uninviting, and the dreamer awoke. Here again the dreamer, thirsting for the shining heights, had first to descend into the dark depths, and this proves to be the indispensable condition for climbing any higher. The prudent man avoids the danger lurking in these depths, but he also throws away the good which a bold but imprudent venture might bring. Okay. All right, well, I'll finish this off with this last paragraph then. The statement made by the dream meets with violent resistance from the conscious mind, which knows spirit only as something to be found in the heights. Spirit always seems to come from above, while from below comes everything that is sordid and worthless. For people who think in this way, spirit means highest freedom, a soaring over the depths, deliverance from the prison of the chthonic world, and hence a refuge for all those timorous souls who do not want to become anything different. But water is earthly and tangible. It is also the fluid of the instinct driven body, blood and the flowing of blood, the odor of the beast, carnality heavy with passion, the Unconscious is the psyche that reaches down from the daylight of mentally and morally lucid consciousness into the nervous system that for ages has been known as the sympathetic nervous system. This does not govern perception and muscular activity like the cerebral spinal system, and thus control the environment. But through functioning without sense organs, it maintains the balance of life through the mysterious paths of the sympathetic excitation. Not only gives us knowledge of the innermost life of other things, but also has an inner effect upon them. In this sense, it is an extremely collective system, the operative basis of all participation mystique, whereas the cerebral spinal function reaches its highest point in separating off the specific qualities of the ego and only apprehends surfaces and externals always through the medium of space. It experiences everything as an outside, whereas the sympathetic system experiences everything as an inside. So let that sink in, the importance of symbolism, and understanding our dreams and how our dreams are the subconscious trying to communicate with us. Um, yeah, how spirit has been removed. To me, it's almost like consciousness is communicating to humans in the collective unconscious what's taking place by giving these dreams of spirit, be, spirit being removed from the fiery heights down to the water, right? And the intellect being raised. Like that's consciousness communicating with us through our dreams and trying to tell us, yo, son, you need to put the heart above everything. You know what I'm saying? You need to have that heart light as a feather. You know, if you keep putting the intellect above the heart, it's an imbalance that, you know, isn't working out well for us because there's no compassion, there's no empathy, it's just cold hearted calculations, you know. So, with that being said, enjoy your Sunday. Be dangerous to those who threaten freedom. St. Pete, I'm out. Peace.